Morning, it's 9:12. We appreciate you watching Minnesota Live. Minnesotans, what we are collectively known for, strong Midwestern accent. Some of ours break soda a little bit more than it should. Being Minnesota nice, tater tot hot dish, ice fishing.
Yeah, we covered it all.
Yeah, we also have our differences, and they can vary greatly from different communities across the state. From Winona to International Falls, Minnesota encompasses a vast diversity of opinions, values, and cultures.
So Sketches of Minnesota explores this in a comedy show. It takes real conversations that were overheard in 10 different Minnesota towns and then turns them into skits. Tane Danger is the co-founder of Danger Boat Productions, and Trygve Throntveit is from the Minnesota Humanities Center. They're both here to tell us a little bit more about the show. Hi, you two.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
So excited to be here.
You guys, let's start backing up a little bit because you guys kind of took the show on the road last year in a little bit of a different form. So talk about that and kind of how what you're doing tonight is how it's different.
So the notion of Sketches of Minnesota as a project was originally that we were going to go to communities all over the state, have a community listening session facilitated by the Minnesota Humanities Center and Trig here in particular, and listen to communities actually talk about things that are really important to them about their towns, about their communities, what's good, what's challenging. And then, as you said, our cast of improvisers listened to all of that. And in each town, they would then, right after the conversation, do a show where they were reflecting back to the community. Here's what we heard you say
that same night.
Yeah, exactly. Like literally right after dinner.
Wow.
Trig, how did you select the cities where you ended up going?
Well, at the Humanities Center, our job is to make sure that Minnesotans themselves are using their own stories to build bridges and build trust and prepare themselves to get things done in their town. So we did not want to just select the people who were ready to do that work.
Yeah.
So we had an open application process. We promoted it every way we knew how, and we asked people to tell us, why you want to bring the show here, what kind of energy you hope to infuse in your town, what challenges you want to surface, and importantly, how are you going to get more than just the usual suspects together, not just in the same place, but different people who might not always interact with one another.
Which is kind of the point of it in the first place, right?
100%.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious about the conversations that were had in these different communities in Minnesota. Did you guys find like common themes? Were there vast differences depending on the region of the state you were in? How did that work?
They're both, yes, and to do good improv work. So there were a lot of themes that we heard in a lot of places. So like issues like belonging, like what does it mean to actually be part of a community? Who gets to be part of it and who's still kind of maybe doesn't feel like they're connected? Issues like what is the future, anxiety or hope about that were similar. But then, there were like similar or differences in some places that were very specific to their thing. But I mean, Trig was the person who was really facilitating these conversations. And like everybody has a story, which is kind of what the Humanities Center is all about. And so bringing that out was a huge part of what we did.
Was it emotional? I mean, was it fiery? I'm just trying to create a picture of, and see what it was like inside one of these.
It was emotional. It was never fiery. We worked very hard to set the tone from the very beginning when talking to our host organizations at the beginning of the evening before the communal meal to make sure that everyone knew they were there for one purpose, and that was to learn about one another. Not to say you don't sometimes have to argue your point or try to come to consensus, but this was to learn about the other people in your community, to learn about your social world so that you can navigate it better. And people did that, and that meant that their emotions were really productive and made them curious about one another. We didn't have a single argument. In fact, we had people saying, I need to call my brother-in-law for the first time in a month or 2 months or a year.
That's huge. Sometimes those family things can really fester and can become a bad deal.
It can be interesting, as we say.
Yeah, interesting. I was very interested in hearing specifically about the community of Emily, where you're at. I am familiar with the area. I know a lot of people from the Twin Cities have cabins up in that area, and the conflict that exists, it may not be no one's going to war over this, but between the cabin owners and people who live in the community of Emily. and who's in charge of Emily?
Right. No, that's a great example of, like, first of all, I got to say, Emily, like, I have a soft spot we went to all these different communities. I love Emily in particular because it's a town of about 700, 800 people, and like 130 people came to the show. So it's like
incredible.
That's a good percentage.
Exactly. It's like 1 in 7 people in the town came to this event, which is amazing. But just as you were saying, like, that issue of, like, whose town is it, right? Like, was kind of there, and it was a thing people really talked about. Like, people who live there year round and are, there when it's good weather and bad weather, not on the weekends. But then there were, people were like, but this is part of what our identity is that there are people who identify with this place and care about this place, but maybe they aren't on the ground the same way as much as we are. And so people talked about that. And, it wasn't that at the end of the day, everybody was like, oh, well, that's solved. But they had a chance to kind of like have some of that out. And then you turn it into comedy.
Well, that's what how do you take that next step then?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so in this final show that we're going to do, and some of the improv had this, there's a sketch in the show about Emily, Minnesota, and it's about how long do you have to live in a place before you're really from there. And in the sketch, like, there's a piece where it's like, oh, congratulations, you've passed the 40-year mark. You are officially like a member of this town, and here you get your certificate, and like you get now access to all of the town secrets that the people who are only here for the weekend so you get to have a little bit of fun with that.
That's a real thing for anybody who's grown up in a small town. If you weren't born in that small town, and you may have been there for 50 years. If you weren't born there, there is a weird disconnect, and you always have this feeling that, like, do people really think I live here? Or, and particularly then if you factor in somebody who is up there just to go to the cabin, then that makes it even more complex.
Yeah, so it's real. Yeah, I will just say, like, there was a woman at one of the shows where Trygve would always facilitate a talk back after the shows, and there was a woman at one of the shows in particular who said, we all want things to change, but we really actually just want them to stay the same, which is sort of one of those statements that you think, like, that's contradictory, and yet that perfectly captures kind of what everybody wants.
Yep.
What are you guys hoping that people take away from the show? Because I think when they hear, like, improv and comedy, like, my mind initially went to, oh, they're going to do the you betchas and they're going to kind of make fun of the Minnesota, right, and us. But that's not at all what you're doing.
No, what we want to do is remind people that they have the power in their community to come together, listen to one another, and understand that many things can be true about their community and many things can be true about themselves. They can be very welcoming and also sometimes standoffish. They can feel very welcomed and sometimes excluded. And if you don't take time to listen to people's stories, you tend to put them in categories. And what we want them to understand is they can do this themselves. We were just here to remind them that they can do it.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks for stopping by. It sounds fascinating. It's very entertaining, a great experiment. So we appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Again, thank you to Tane and Trig for a link to register to Sketches of Minnesota. Head to minnesotalive.com.